Hello. Today I'm reading from Speeches That Changed the World, published by Smith Davies Publishing Limited in London. And this passage is the Nobel acceptance speech from Marie Curie, who was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, which she did in physics in 1903, and the first person ever to win 2 Nobel Prizes, her second being in 1911 in chemistry. I could tell you many things about radium and radioactivity, and it would take a long time. But as we cannot do that, I shall only give you a short account of my early work about radium. Radium is no more a baby. It is more than 20 years old. The conditions of the discovery were somewhat peculiar, so it is always of interest to remember them and to explain them. We must go back to the year 1897. Professor Curie and I worked at that time in a laboratory in the School of Physics and Chemistry where Professor Curie held his lectures. I was engaged in some work on uranium rays, which had been discovered 2 years before by Professor Becquerel. I spent some time in studying the way of making good measurements of the uranium rays, and then I wanted to know if there were other elements giving out rays of the same kind. So I took up work about all known elements and their compounds and found that uranium compounds are active, and also all thorium compounds, but other elements were not found active, nor were their compounds. Then I took up measurements of minerals and found that several of those which contain uranium or thorium, or both, were active. But then the activity was not what I could expect. It was greater than for uranium or thorium compounds, like the oxides, which are almost entirely composed of those elements. Then I thought that there should be, in the minerals, some unknown element having much greater radioactivity than uranium or thorium. And I wanted to find out and to separate that element, and I settled to that work with Professor Curie. We thought it would be done in several weeks or months, but it was not so. It took many years of hard work to finish that task. There was not one new element, there were several of them. But the most important is radium, which could be separated in a pure state. Now, the special interest of radium is in the intensity of its rays, which are several million times greater than uranium rays. And the effects of the rays make radium so important. If we take a practical point of view, then the most important property of the rays is the production of physiological effects on the cells of human organism. These effects may be used for the cure of several diseases. Good results have been attained in many cases. What is considered peculiarly important is the treatment of cancer. The medical utilization of radium makes it necessary to get that element in sufficient quantities, and so a factory of radium was started to begin with in France, and later in America, where a big quantity of ore named carnotite is available. America does produce many grams of radium every year, but the price is still very high because the quantity of radium contained in the ore is so small. The radium is more than 100,000 times dearer than gold. But we must not forget that when radium was discovered, no one knew that it would prove useful in hospitals. The work was one of pure science. And this is a proof that the scientific work must not be considered from the point of view of the direct usefulness of it. It must be done for itself, for the beauty of science, and then There is always the chance that a scientific discovery may become, like the radium, a benefit for humanity. Scientific history of radium is beautiful. The properties of the rays have been studied very closely. We know that particles are expelled from radium with a very great velocity near to that of light. We know that the atoms of radium are destroyed by expulsion of these particles, and some of which are atoms of helium. And in that way it's been proved that the radioactive elements are constantly disintegrating, and that they produce at the end ordinary elements, principally helium and lead. That is, as you see, a theory of transformation of atoms which are not stable, as was believed before, but may undergo spontaneous changes. There is always a vast field left to experimentation, and I hope that we may have some beautiful progress in the following years. It is my earnest desire that some of you should carry on this scientific work and keep for your ambition determination to make a permanent contribution to science.